everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. So about a week ago, I asked all of you to submit your Tanki Online hot takes, and today we'll be going over all of the different comments that you guys made, and I'll be giving my opinion on these hot takes. It doesn't matter if old Tanki is going to be back, it'll die off too, because people are chasing the memories they had while playing the game, not the actual game. Now, I both agree and disagree. I do think the game will do really well. Tanki Classic will do really well at the beginning, but it's going to be hard to figure out if the game's gonna continue to do well over the years. There's classic versions of games like World of Warcraft that actually do pretty well even years after they were released. So I think as long as Tanki keeps adding those old events like Halloween, Christmas, the ones that people loved, and the simplisticness of those events, I think the game could continue to do well. Because as long as people have a computer to play at, they're gonna go and see, ooh, this game I played 10 years ago is doing the old Halloween. I used to love that. And I still think events could definitely make the numbers spike, even if the numbers dip after the honeymoon phase. Corpses should not stick around for a few seconds blocking your path. Absolutely infuriates the heck out of me. Why should I be punished for destroying a lot of enemies? It hinders those trying to attack an area. I agree with this. I've been saying this for like a year or two, ever since Tanki added the whole dead body effect. They like to say it was added initially to create more of a dynamic factor in games, especially when catching golds, but I find it just so infuriating that you are punished for killing someone because you kill someone on a ramp. You can't now use that ramp for a few seconds, and if you try to push through the body, you'll just lag and risk the chance of flipping. It's just, it adds more hurdles than it does a dynamic factor. Hot take, they can keep the HTML5 engine but use the old Flash UI and graphics. That would look awesome. I think they're doing that with Tanki Classic, or at least using the Unity engine, which I'm pretty sure is what they use for normal Tanki now, and HTML5 is just what they import the Unity version of the game to. I think it could work. Again, if it's on a certain engine, but it has the same graphics, you're not really going to tell it's on a certain engine. I think Tanki Classic will do well if it looks like the old version, rather than it looks like a copy of the old version integrated into HTML5. So we'll have to see what it looks like in the tests. If it feels even a semblance like current Tanki or the HTML5 version, we're going to run into some big problems. The overdrives are a fun feature and make the game much more exciting. I really like how every hole has something different. Now, I can agree with this and disagree. I think it would be better if overdrives, you could only use it like once a game. It was this thing where if you were in a pickle in the game, you could use it and get out of it. Now, I don't like the factor that you use an overdrive against someone and you're going to beat them almost 100% of the time. I think overdrives should more be a skill thing that you can use rather than just, oh, I press one button and bam, the enemy dies no matter what they do. That's why I don't like overdrives now, because it adds this factor to the game of luck, where if you're unlucky enough where the enemy that you're killing has an overdrive, yeah, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do against an overdrive, which I think ends up making the game worse. Tanki Online doesn't require that much skill at all. Sure, there are some augments that require a good amount of skill, but if you will do good or not depends 80% on your augments and upgrades. Now, yeah, this is obviously true, but I think there is a certain amount of skill to the game. Like when I made a non-buying Road to Legend a few years ago, I was doing really well. I didn't spend any money. I knew what to use. I knew which augments I got were good. And if you have that knowledge in the game, it can actually benefit you a ton. So I think, yeah, it's probably a good 60-40, where 60% of how well you do depends on your equipment, where 40% depends on how you play, what combos you're using, just your overall knowledge of the game to actually get an advantage on the enemy players. Subway and old maps should be added into the rotation. Most of the matchmaking maps are pretty bland compared to the old gems. Now, this is both a yes and no, and I wouldn't say this is too much of a hot take. Honestly, any map that gets added is a big W, because the less maps we have, the more boring the matchmaking pool is. But I think there's a lot of maps that they just can't add to matchmaking anymore, like Noise. Any of those maps that had a verticality to it is ruined because of Tesla and Magnum, and that's why I'm so happy they're not adding Tesla or Magnum to Tanki Classic, because those turrets ruin the playstyle of so many maps just by making it to where if you have a vertical turret, other enemies who aren't using that turret are then screwed. When they add new equipment, it's usually OP for the first 4 weeks, then becomes close to unusable unless you have a buyer alt. Now, Tanki's admitted this being correct. They add new augments, have to make them good in order for people to actually want to get them, and then they'll nerf it and make them more balanced overall. Although every once in a while they'll add an augment that just stays good for the longest time, like Helios stayed good for forever until they finally nerfed it. Same with Vacuum for Striker. That was a long time before they finally nerfed it, and it's still really good. So it really just depends on the augment. But yeah, most augments and new stuff we get is really broken at the start, and then Tanki ends up nerfing it. Game sense is a factor in this game. Wish it was better, but the timings, etc. are one of the fun parts about this game. It's not always W and left click. I think game sense is about 40% of the game. Now, yes, 60% of the game is what equipment you're using, what do you have on your account, what have you bought, but I think there's a good chunk of the game where game sense actually helps you perform much better, because if you have the exact same stuff as an enemy, but you know to use your environment around you to then attack him, and he doesn't, that's a big portion of the game that a lot of people underestimate. Sport mode should have been taken to the next step, ranked matchmaking. A great incentive to come back and grind the game to get a higher skill-based rank. Esports exists, why doesn't this exist? Now, I think Tanki Online Ranked could work if the game had 3 to 4 times more players, if not more. But the problem with current Tanki Online is there's not enough players to make Tanki Online Ranked fun, because you'll end up getting to a high rank and then just verse the exact same people over and over. And then if you're versing bots in ranked, well, then it's not going to feel like you achieved anything. So I think ranked would be awesome if we had a lot more players, and it's just, it wouldn't work in current Tanki Online. There's not enough people to keep it interesting each game. In my opinion, the OP augments are a fun mechanic that is good for the game. Now, this is a pretty big hot take, because I would say that OP augments ruin the game, and the current constant cycle of OP augments being added, OP augments getting nerfed, just makes the game not that much fun. Because say you're an old player coming back to the game, you just want to have fun, you had a legend account that was maxed out 6 years ago, and you come play the game, that maxed out account will not do you any good. And you're not going to be able to do good because you don't have any of the augments that you can get from containers that are OP. So people who are coming back, they're going to realize, wow, I can't do anything in these games because I don't have a good augment, that I can't perform well. So I think these pay to win augments are actually a massive detriment, at least in the way you get them, because people who come back who don't have any containers, they're screwed. They have to play the game for a few weeks to save up containers to hopefully get lucky to get a good augment. The player base still hasn't accepted that the current version of Tanki isn't going to get better and still play it because of nostalgia and addiction. Now, I think you can say this about a lot of games. Like people who play Fortnite still, you can make the exact same argument there where people play it purely for nostalgia and what the game was. The game is just different. I mean, all games have to change in order to stay relevant, even if the change isn't good. Like if Tanki Online stayed the exact same for however long it's been out, it would be, I think, far worse than what it is currently. Or you can make the argument that it would be doing a lot better if it stayed the exact same. I mean, that's why Tanki Classic is coming out. But I think a lot of people enjoy the game for what it is. And even though I don't, I think there's still an argument to be said that the game is in a good place. Not for me, but some people will make that argument. This is a cool one that I saw earlier. Supplies that are dropped throughout the maps should be the only supplies you can get. Without activating supplies, it becomes almost impossible to win fights. That's what I like. Supplies that are dropped throughout the maps should be the only supplies you can get. I think this would be a cool dynamic, maybe even a fun mode for Tanki to add, just because with drones, the supply system has gotten so complicated. I mean, not that complicated, but it's kind of gone away from what supplies originally were intended for. But I think this would be a cool idea for a special mode. Remove 50% resistance. Having something to shoot 2 times longer than it should take is absurd. I kind of like the idea more of what Tanki is doing for Tanki Classic, to where they add a protection for a combination of turrets and have just like 3 to 4 different protections that protect against a certain set of turrets. I think I like that idea more. Bringing it all the way up to 50% is just, I think it's too much. 30% I'd say is the max, 10% minimum, and I think that would be perfect. But 50% resistance, if you're versing someone with that, even if you have an OP augment, it's still going to be really difficult to beat someone. And that's maybe why Tanki keeps it at 50%, because the non-buying players who have max protections, that's the only thing they can really do to go against someone with a really good augment. It's not hard to get pay-to-win items or good augments if you save all your containers and rubies. Now, this was true at a time, I would say, but Tanki has slowly reduced the amount of ultra containers you get per event. It used to be 15, then it was 5, then it was 3, then they put it back up to 5 or whatever. Now it's down to 3 again. So it's so slow to get containers nowadays. Maybe if Tanki buffed the amount of containers you get per special event, it'd be a lot better. But it used to be 15 before the introduction of keys, and now it's just 3 a week. So it's very, very difficult nowadays, in my opinion. Whereas when you got 15 a week, that was a lot better for saving up. It had its high, and it was the early 2010 to 2015 era. I'd say Tanki Online also did really well in 2019. I mean, that was the year Jumper, me, a bunch of other YouTubers were getting videos with 100,000 views in that pro versus noob era. So I'd say 2019 was the last year that it did really well. Now, for me personally, my best month was in 2022 when I was uploading daily and streaming almost daily. That was an insane end of the year in 2022 for me. So For me personally, that was my favorite year of Tanki because I was uploading so much and so many new people were coming to the channel, and it was just fun for me. But I'd say 2019 was the last year that you really had the option of getting 100,000 views per video, and then of course you had a random breakout video from random people. Tanki Classic will do better than the main game itself. Now this is something I agree with, but something that the actual Tanki Online developers don't agree with. Now obviously it's going to do better at the beginning for the first few months when it's in its honeymoon phase, but after that we're going to have to wait and see. If Tanki Online adds the old fun events and the game is actually hard to progress through, and so the events mean something, I think the game could have a massive boost in players whenever these events come around. People don't miss 2015 Tanki, but the year 2015. I mean, 2015, everyone was younger, so they're obviously going to look back fondly on a lot of the years, but I think the memories you made during Tanki in 2015 were just incredible, and the game actually had a lot of good aspects of it back then. This is something I can make an entire video about, but I think Tanki Online 2015 still had some fun stuff. Flash UI was one of the key aspects of the game, and by introducing whatever the heck the modern HTML5 is, they killed the atmosphere. I'd agree. The game just looks like your average new game that comes out, like this. I don't know how to explain it. The old Flash HUD and everything in it just had this certain personality to it that I don't think we really get with current Tanki. So I'm excited for Tanki Classic to see how they bring it back. Augments are not pay to win. If you have crystal augments, you can easily keep up with the meta. You don't need the most OP ones. Just look at the new augments that come out. Now you can use old OP augments that haven't been nerfed that much, but I think any augment underneath that exotic to legendary rarity is almost unusable. Now there's some good crystal augments, but a lot of them have been nerfed over the last few years. Like all of the smoky crystal augments were nerfed, I think about a year ago. So I would disagree with this take. People who use mouse controls have less skill than people who use keyboard controls. Now I'm a mouse control player, so how am I going to defend this? I would say just mouse controls are easier, yeah, but that doesn't mean you have less skill because you use something that's easier. I mean, if you're not using mouse, your camera is limited to how fast your turret is. If you're using mouse controls, you can look around without having to wait for your turret speed. So I think in that one factor, even if it's easier, I don't think you have less skill because you use it. More maps, not HD maps, would improve the game. I like the HD maps, but it seems whenever they add an HD map, they remove the old version from the game. Like they're trying to slowly remove all the old maps in the game and just have HD maps in the matchmaking, which I don't know. I mean, you can go to most games and see a really cool map, so it's not the coolness that I think is really exciting. I think it's how you compare the old and the new version that's the most exciting for me, but I think if they had both in matchmaking, it'd be a lot more fun. Tanki Online players have no idea what they want. I think I have a general idea, and that's going back to a more classic version, or a more dumbed down version of the game, where you have a lot less that can kill people. I think the simplicity of old Tanki had its perks, whereas the chaos in current Tanki has a lot more negatives than positives. HD maps are bad, they aren't optimized, and they should stop remastering maps. I think the remastering idea is actually pretty cool. I'd like to see it done in a more futuristic setting, because Tanki Online in itself is a futuristic game with all the different turrets you have. So I would like to see Tanki go above and beyond with making these really cool future maps. Like seeing a future remastered would be very, very cool. And then you can look at all the old Tanki X maps that looked really nice, and getting those in Tanki Online I think would also be fun. Having maps where you can interact with the actual environment would also be nice. And that's all the Tanki Online hot takes that I have. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Taspens. I'll see you in a future video, everybody. Peace out.